I just remember that it was a very pleasant, happy life we had, free, playing all over the property. We were always out of the house. We didn't play in our house. We just had so many things to do. Running down to the river. We had a very big river between Spaldings and where is the other one? Frankfield.
Yeah.
That's the name of another little town. Spaldings and Frankfield. Between there.
Your dad owned many acres, right?
Many acres. Yes, and handed down, it went from generation to generation. Yes.
Through his side of the family.
Yes, his side of the family. And of course, over the years, he would add onto it by buying pieces of lands that were up for sale. And so very far, we didn't have many neighbors around because all the lands belonged to my dad around. Mm-hmm. So we had a lot of things to do as children. I used to like to follow him when he's out with the men, and then there were always men working in the fields.
They were hired men.
They were hired men, and they would do the work while my father would sort of oversee them, what they're doing. Sugar cane and bananas, tropical fruits, oranges and grapefruits, and we had cow just for domestic use for the family because, as you know, we had quite a bit of, it's a large family. We had milk. I can remember 8 quarts of milk. We consumed that every day. Yes, I was about 12. It was Friday half-day school, and I usually have my lunch and take off to where the men and my father were working. We had a sugar mill, a place, a sort of a factory where they make sugar for the market. People would come and get the sugar to sell in the nearby markets. And I liked to go and to see the horse pulling the what we call the mill, the grinder, around, and they would allow me to put the sugar cane in and see the juices coming down into the big barrels. It was fun. Yes, one Friday we went and they got the news. My mom sent the message there will be a hurricane, and my dad and I, that we were just about leaving the mill to get home. He was on his horse and I was on Kitty, our family mule that we usually ride on, and my dad helped me up on the mule and said I'm to go ahead, and he was behind, and we reached where the river was, and it was very swollen, coming down with many trees and huge rocks. I remember that clearly, and yet I wasn't afraid. The mule just walked carefully over, and my dad followed on his horse. Aunt Sissy and I, when we were very small, they would put us in baskets called hampers. They went over the back of the mule, and they put each child in one hamper, and they would say she understood that it is time to go home. That meant that Kitty should take us home, and no one was directing her. The mule just went on her merry old way and went right home to our mother, and then she would just stop right there when she gets to the veranda where we would be taken off. There was a big veranda off the kitchen. So we went from the fields right to our mother, safely carried there by the mule.
So it could carry two of you?
Yes.
On each side?
Yeah, we were little children, yes. We balanced. We were well balanced. Alfred, we call him Brother Freddy. And then I'm going by their birth. Phyllis, who we call sister, and Brother George, we called him Brother George, and then Lawrence, that was the third brother, the last brother, and then our sister Lorna, Emma, Nellie, Cora, Lily, Peggy, myself, and Sissy. Actually, her correct name is Sylvia, but we called her Sissy. We played house 18 months apart. She was the last one. Big rocks, and they were like caves with trees hanging over, and we would go into these rocks. If it's raining, we wouldn't run up to the house. Lower down, there was an old house that my mother and father lived in, I think, when they first got married, and all the children were born there, except me. The last house was built when my mother was expecting me, so I was the first one to be born in that house, and then my sister Sissy. It was built from pure cedar.
Cedar on the property?
Yes.
Did
your
dad build it, or he had his men?
Oh no, builders came and built it. But the cedar lumber came from our property. They didn't have to buy lumber. They have everything on that property. Yeah.
Do you know what the property was known as in the area?
Oh yes, it was called indeed Keda. I remember that they were just hard-working people. My father woke up early in the morning, and my mother, of course, making breakfast, but he was dressed and off to be with the men who were working, and my mom stayed with us, and she was with us at all times at home. Two older brothers got married, and then they had their own homes, and they had their own properties, farm and did as our dad did, just did farming, had their own bananas and sugar cane, and the factories used to come down with trucks to haul it away. I remember that, to take the sugar cane also to the factories, not only by making their sugar at our factory, but they would come and take it away to make sugar, and it was exported to other countries from Jamaica. My first sister was on Cora to leave the island. She went to England to be trained as a nurse, went to nursing school. Yeah, she was the first sister who left the island. And then my sister Lily followed about 2 years after, or a year.
Were those the
to
only
England.
two to become nurses? Or?
3 of them. Sissy went also later on. I was 19 and she was 18 when she left Jamaica. I remember that clearly, when she came to say goodbye. I had malaria fever, and it was a very bad time for me. I was, I think, almost 2 months in the hospital because I was very sick. I would like to mention why that was the first time I felt the need, spiritual part of my life started, because I desired, after I started to feel better from my malaria attack, I wanted to give my life to the Lord, because my sister-in-law came by and just said to me, for all I saw you went through in this sickness with the malaria, and you are better, I think that it would be a wise thing if you give your life at this young age to the Lord. I was 16 years old.
But did you know what that meant then?
Oh yes,
to do that?
I know. I thought, and I cried in the hospital that night because there was no one to help me to give my life to the Lord. So I think that now that I know that you don't really need anyone to be there to help you in praying to the Lord to save you and to help you and to commit your life to the Lord. I think the Lord was right there in the hospital with me that night, and I think I did commit myself to the Lord from I was 16 that night. And so that's why I think He had His great plan to direct me to live with my Aunt Vi, who could influence my life. For I went home from the hospital and it was time to go to business school, where I spent 2 years at business school preparing myself to work in an office that was what they felt I was best suited for. And so after I finished my business course 2 years, I felt a need. I felt a tug to sit and write a letter to ask my aunt if I could come to live with her, and to find a job in the city. That was the leading of the Lord.
And did she want you to come at first?
At first, no. My father, who was a very a careful man, he didn't say very much, went up before I asked him permission to write my aunt a letter to live with her. And he went up and asked my aunt if she could allow me to live with her, because I seemed to be the kind of girl who was so much like her, Aunt Vi, and I would do so well living with her. But she said, Cyril, I think that this age in my life, I don't think I want to have another teenager living to be responsible for. And so she sort of turned him down. But out of the Clare, I just felt the need to write her. I asked my dad if I could write my aunt to live, if he would allow me to live with her, and he said very tactfully, I don't know, you may be wasting your time. I said, I have nothing to lose, Papa. I am going to write her. It's just to sit and write a letter. And my aunt told me when she received my letter, the Holy Spirit spoke to her and said to her, I want you to go and to get this young girl. You have to go and get her. And so she wrote me back surprisingly that I must tell my parents, my mom and dad, that she is willing to come down on the 2nd of August. That was in 1955. I'm to be prepared. She's driving from the city to get me. And that was the day I left home. It was 7 years of preparation for my entire life, living with her. And God had His plan, and she was a very wise woman. I didn't say to her that when I was in the hospital I wanted to commit my life to the Lord. At that time, strange enough, hard to believe, I didn't talk very much. I didn't talk very much. I was very quiet and shy. And I went there in August, and Aunt Vi, of course, was a godly woman, and she went to the house of the Lord every single Sunday, and sometimes in the week, especially when there was a convention around, she would make sure. But she told me after I went and made a commitment publicly to give my life to the Lord, she said she prayed for me from the day she drove me there that I would commit my life to the Lord. But she never would tell me herself suggests to me that I should give my life to the Lord. Although she has led hundreds and hundreds of people to the Lord over her time of missionary work on the island. She said she studied me and realized I was a very obedient child. She called me a child. I was at 18. She said she didn't want me to obey her by going to give my life to the Lord. She wanted and prayed the Lord would speak into my heart that at this very young age, I need to give my life to the Lord. And so she was rejoicing the night in January. A couple from the United States, from the Assemblies of God, came to the church where Aunt Vi and I attended. They had a crusade for 3 weeks straight, and that was the time I took the opportunity. I was so happy that at last I could walk down and publicly walk up to the altar when the altar was called for who want to commit their lives to the Lord. And I was one of the first ones that walked up that night, January of 56, for that was a few months after I went to live with her. And from then, what a life we lived. She spiritually, some nights on weekends we had all-night prayer, and she taught me about the Lord, reading the Bible and praying all night. We lived alone, and so I grew. The Lord taught me so much. It was, oh my goodness, it was a great time of solid foundation, learning about the Lord. And it was a very wonderful time preparing for my life. She got someone to teach her. She told me when she was in her 50s to drive a car. And so she would go on a long journey up these mountainous hills and to go home to visit my grandmother, who was her mom. And yeah, we had experiences. The day before we went on this trip to go see Grandma and my parents, she took her car to be checked out at the garage and make sure everything is all right. And apparently one of the young men did not put all the screws in, and she didn't know, and we found out going up the hills when we were about to get to where we're going. The car reacted in a strange way, started reversing when we're going forward, and I had to get out and find a big rock and put by the wheels, and we didn't know what was going on with it. We stayed only a few hours and started back home to the city, and then this hill is 7 miles down the hill, 7 miles. It's pure hill. that you have to just drive down. And she said to me that there's a possibility that we both will go to heaven right now, because I am not to jump out of a car, because she is aware that the brake was not being in use. It wasn't acting, it was just speeding down. She could not control the car, and she knows what is at the end of the hill. A big, tall, concrete wall that she knew possibly she would not be able to maneuver the car around the curb. So she said, don't jump out. But then while we were going almost down to the bottom, she said she heard a voice said to her, turn the ignition off. She turned the key in the car to off, and it just lost that power, and just gradually lost the power. And by the time we got to that big concrete wall, it stopped, because she said it's like a voice told her to turn the ignition off. And some men came and helped us to get into the city from there. Yeah, because they realized we were in trouble, and we stopped at the garage, and they did all of this work, and we got home. I remember, which on the island is a late time, it was 12 p.m. we got home, and the next day my aunt phoned her garage to come and get the car, and when she told the owner of the garage where we drove it, where we came home that night, he said, I can't believe it. It's a miracle that you and your niece are alive, because some of the screws were missing. After my mother died, once on a Saturday when I wasn't at work, I decided to go visit my dad, pay him a visit, and the housekeeper roasted a lovely chicken for me to take down for Papa, and I took the bus down, and I would come back at night in the same bus, would return back to the city. And I had time with Papa. He was happy to see me, and we ate a supper together, and we talked, and I prayed with my Papa. I prayed with him, and I went back up to the bus stop and took the bus back to the city, to Aunt Vi's home. But when I reached a certain part of the journey called on the way to Kingston, to the city, this part of the city called Spanish Town, some men who were Rastafarians came into the bus. They wanted to sit beside me. They came, and I in a way I wasn't afraid, because I was trusting the Lord. I was just a little girl alone, and they wanted to sit with me, and they questioned me where I was coming from and everything, and so I just be myself. I sat and talked with them and be myself. And now we got to the city, and I have to stop, get out of the country. We call these buses the country bus, and take a city bus, not a few blocks up to my aunt's home. But where the country bus has to drop me off was not a nice place. It could be dangerous. And those precious men who everyone would be scared to say, I am getting off the bus and they're following me off the bus too. Because I think they live in that area around there. And it was an amazing experience. These men came out and they said, oh, you are taking the bus up Hadley Park. Do you realize it's very dangerous here? We cannot leave you here. We will never leave you here. We are here to protect you. We're here to protect you. We're waiting until your bus comes. And they were so kind. They stayed at the bus shed with me, and there drove up my Hadley Park bus. And they just wish me all the best and say, God bless you, and I thank them for staying with me. And that was in my mind that was, they were protection sent from the Lord. I just put everything that happened to me, that He was always protecting me. Those were men who the Lord sent there to protect me. The Lord, I worked there at United Fruit Company for nearly 7 years. First of all, that was one of my first experience I had with my aunt. A few days after I went to live with her, she drove me into the city, down where all the offices were. And that office, United Fruit Company, was one of the most outstanding offices that everyone craved to get a job in. It is such a well-known American company. The employees were special people. So Aunt Vi, I think after I found the Lord and know that He was certainly taking care of me and providing for me, I think my aunt, in faith, she took me and she showed me this tall 2-story big office by the sea at the wharf, and said to me, you are going to be working in this office. That's where I think you deserve a job in this office, meaning one of the best on the island. And I can tell you, she was well known. She knew of one of the young ladies who used to come to her book store, and she phoned her and said, I have a niece here going on 18 and she needs a job. Keep your eyes looking out at United Fruit, where you're working there for her. And within 1 month I was in that office working. I just a little country girl. I didn't know about city life. I grew up on the farm. I didn't know anything, and how the Lord just helped me and prepare me, and just everyone fell in love with me when I went. I was like a little treat to them. I was the youngest person working in that office. I worked on the second floor in the accounting department, and they were men and women. Women were mostly the secretaries, and I was sort of almost like the company's auditor, because every account, anything to do with figures, I had to check it out for the men, the payrolls, everything coming in. I had to check it, to put it through the machine that I was taught by this operator from Boston. And not many operators were on the island. They have to just teach you what they want you to do on that machine. And I took a liking to the machine. I was just able to do whatever was required of me to do. And once I stamp my name on whatever I checked, it meant that they could go ahead, that it was perfectly correct. So I enjoy that job very much. I would like to say this, that my time in that office was planned of the Lord, because I was able to testify, because I was so young. The young men who worked there used to be very curious about my Christian life I lived. And the Lord used me. I did not use my working hours, but when I got my hour lunch time, I said, you can come and talk to me, and I would answer their questions during my lunch time after I went to the cafeteria and had my meal. And they heard and saw my life, and over those years, many of them heard, not only the young ones, but the older men. The Lord helped me to let my light shine there. And they heard and they saw what it meant, that a young life lived for the Lord, how the Lord used me in many times. And in one particular time, one gentleman whose desk was pretty near to mine, he was the supervisor, who was very quiet, but he got sick and had cancer and went to Boston, taken back to Boston to be operated on. And when he came back, he said to me, when I was in my bed in the hospital, I remembered you, Miss Rose, he called me. As a little girl, I know you didn't know, I overheard all the things you talk about Jesus, all the things you told the young men when you were talking. I was listening, and I heard all you had to say. And when I was faced with death, I said, I hope that little girl is praying for me, because she knows God, she knows about Jesus, and I'm hoping that she's praying for me. And that was really an encouragement. That was a blessing. Every week when we had to go and to the cashier to collect our pay, he knew who I was. Every time I walk up to him, he would start singing this chorus, I'd rather have Jesus than anything this world affords today. I'd rather have Jesus than silver or gold. And that was indeed a testimony, because they knew who I was, that I was a child of God who was walking with him, and it caused them to think of God whenever they saw me in the office.
Was that man a Christian who sang that song?
No, he was not, but it caused him to think about God. Yes, and one elderly man who was Jewish, who would come in from the wharf, would type out spiritual songs, hymns, and he said, I thought of these hymns because I was coming into the office, and I know I'm going to meet your desk first of all. And he would come and greet me and hand them the songs of worship to God, because he knows who I am, and he wanted to greet me with those hymns. So the Lord, I'm just adding it up all, that he opened the door for me for all those years. They remember how the Lord kept me, and how he helped me to let my light shine. At Christmas, when they were having their Christmas party, I didn't stay away. They wanted me to sing songs for them. And they offered, can you have some drinks? I said, no thanks, I will have a glass of water. And I was there. And the Lord would help me to sing songs that instantly I would just get the words and put it to a tune and sing it to them. And I was bold. I was not afraid. I would sing to them. Whenever they're having maybe a party or a send-off for one who is retiring, they would ask me to say a word, or whatever I was able to do, and I all did something to bring glory to the Lord. One Christmas, I found myself singing, it was New Year's, going to New Year's Eve. We got together, and I found singing, instead of happy birthday, I've made up this song, Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year. God bless you. Happy New Year to you. May you all try to do God's will and to live right for him. Happy New Year to you. Those are sort of the ways God used me in this big office. And I was a shy girl, but when it came to testify or to give a word for the Lord, I was not afraid. They knew exactly who I was. It was like I was in the army being trained, the Lord, because she eventually got into a very serious accident. Her car was smashed to pieces, and she was out of it. She only knew me on and off. She went in and out. She had a concussion. She was totally smashed up. Her kneecap was all powdered, her bones, and her left arm and all her fingers were totally. And I was only a very young girl, and I had to take charge of her, run her home, took care of her, move her, be signed responsible for her to move her to a private hospital where she wanted to go. And I had her there for 3 months. She was in the hospital being mended and helped. Put new steel in her for bones in her knee and her fingers. They were all, bones were broken, and her hands were stiff. They think that she would never walk again, the doctors, and that she wouldn't be able to use her hand. And she wept because she just adored playing her piano that she had there. And the Lord used me. I visited her for had to go to work 3 months. Every single evening I came home and went to the hospital, which was not far, but I had to go on the bus again to visit her. And when the doctors took off her cast off her arm, she said, she cried all day. Her arm had been withered. I said, why are you crying, Aunt Vi? And she says, she started telling me, and she got crying. And the Spirit of the Lord just gave me a boldness, because I am in awe of her spiritually because of who she was. She was such a woman who was used of the Lord over the years as a missionary all over the island, and she knew the Lord so personally and intimately. But the Lord, and is my aunt, and we were brought up to just be mild with older folk and our aunt, and all of a sudden I looked at her, and the Spirit of the Lord came on me to help her. And I heard when I said, Aunt Vi, I can't imagine that you of all people, you were crying because of this. I said, what, do you remember the man with the withered hand? And I'm not crying at all. And I was a crybaby in those days. I was soft. I cried, would cry so gently. And then I said, well, I have to pray for you. You are no different from that man that Jesus said, forth your withered arm. And I said, okay, Aunt Vi, your difference is you're a woman and he was a man. And I said, stretch out your arm. And I held her, put my hand on her arm, and I prayed, and I said, Lord, just as you healed that man with the withered arm, pray that you will heal your servant. You have seen her tears all day. Help her to stop her crying and to be encouraged, and remember your word that you said you will never leave her nor forsake her. Heal her arm, Jesus. And a short prayer, and I said amen, because I was a young Christian. And she stopped crying, and I said, Auntie, trust the Lord, you're going to be all right. And I packed up all her clothes to wash, her nighties and everything, and said, I will come back tomorrow, Auntie, I'll come back. I went home and prayed, and she said when I left the room, the Lord spoke to her and continued her healing start, and He gave her strength not to weep, not to give up, but to ask me to go get a rubber ball, a little ball, for her to do this. And the Lord gradually shocked the doctors. All of these in here are steel bones in her joints. And she did this and did this and did this for a while, until eventually her finger, they were like that, and a little bit more came like that, until she was perfectly fine. When your dad gave me at her home this ring, he gave it to her and to pray, to bless my engagement ring, and she gave it back to him, and then she left us out on the porch, and she went towards into the piano room where the piano was, and she started playing just like that. All the weeping that she was afraid that she wouldn't be able to play the piano again, because she used to worship the Lord and songs and play and worship Him when she's alone, of course, yeah. And then she started playing when your dad put the ring on my finger and said, she sung and played, "For all the Lord has done for me, I will never cease to praise Him. He has done so much for me." And that was a blessing to see that she was able to play that after a while. I felt that I got the word from the Lord that your dad was my husband, that He has chosen for me. At last my visa came after waiting for 3 months to come over as Dickie's bride, and it was a very sad, joyful for my aunt, but a very sad time for her to lose me. She got so accustomed living with me for 7 years. It was very hard. She didn't hide. She wept when my visa came in the mail, because she knows I was leaving. And I remember very well the last meal the housekeeper made for us, that we both had. It was, we called it the Last Supper. She spoke to me as, maybe when we're finished, we weren't talking too much while we're eating, but she encouraged me, and she praised me for who I was, who she noticed how I developed and matured over the 7 years, most of all my spiritual development, how the Lord had really taught me many, many things. And she was sure when I leave her and come away, the Lord would be with me, and that I was an excellent person to to live with her for 7 years as I receive her teachings and how and did things to even encourage her in her walk with the Lord, although she has been on the battlefield for years and years. So it was a thanksgiving to the Lord that she helped to form my character, especially Christian stability, and she was praising the Lord that very last evening. It was very nice of all our neighbors on Redford Road in Jamaica, all of Aunt Vi's friends who knew me. They all wanted to say goodbye to me at the airport, so a few of them drove out, and it was nice that I got to hug them all before I left. And Aunt Cora drove me and drove Aunt Vi back home. So I came, and your dad got me at the airport. He had rented a furnished flat not far away from his own house for us to stay there until the flat that he wanted at his home for us to be our home together was available.
It was being rented?
It was being rented. A family with 2 little boys lived in it, and they had to find a place, and we had it all cleaned up before we could move there. So we stayed, and it was good that we were alone together anyway at that furnished flat where we stayed.
How long did you stay there?
2 months. 2 months.
And then you moved into Alberta Avenue?
Yes.
Which was it, 46 Alberta?
46 Alberta Avenue. And Aunt Mercy and Uncle Jimmy were living there with him before we got married, and they were on the 2nd floor, and he wanted to be with me living on the 1st floor, the flat on the 1st floor. So they lived on the 2nd floor, and the 3rd floor was rented to Civil Clark and another young man from Knox Presbyterian Church, to a very large room where 2 single men lived, Civil and Gordon from Knox College, Knox Presbyterian Church. Yeah.
So is that how you got to know Frank? Is because it was Civil's friend?
That's right. When he and Angela planned to come to Canada, he wrote, I think he kept in touch with Civil, although Civil was a much older young man than him. They used to play around as young men, when young boys together. He kept in touch with Civil and asked him if there's by chance any way of getting a room for him. He's coming to Canada. And Civil told him yes. He's sure that Dave and Peggy, where he lived, there will be a room for him. So when he comes, he gave the telephone number and the address for him to contact him there, Civil. So the day he came, and rang the bell, he actually asked for Civil. He was 19 years old.
He was young, eh?
Yes, but he looked old, older. He had a cigar. Yes, he was much older looking. He spent 6 months with us until he got married, yes. He and Angela got married and he moved to their own apartment. Angela came up also and had to live with a lady, boarded there, I think, until they got married. They moved in their own apartment. Actually, I met all the friends of your dad, Mr. and Mrs. Pennycook, Edith and Max, yes, and Dottie and Renix Solomon. They all were here. Barbara Ten. And of course, I met many older Christian people from the Brethren Church. Your dad was going down to Markham Street Church, a very big hall that was taken up by the subway, Bloor Street subway, bought out this big hall from the Brethren Church, and it was torn down because that was a part of the subway. It was in the path of the subway stations. Dwight was born by then, and then we had to go to Silverthorne, which is off Rogers Road, I think, in the West End. Dwight was almost 3 when we came, and I went there the December, and then I got pregnant. When he became 5, 6, oh, he was always running and jumping and singing songs. Yeah, he was full of energy, but his greatest joy was to play with Frank. He was very attached to Frank because Frank was very daring with him. Your father was more protective, his dad, but Frank would lift him and throw him in the air, and he would scream and laugh because Frank was very young then, quite a young man.
And he used to tell a lot of stories?
Oh yes, oh definitely, yeah, he talked a lot, but he used to pull Dwight around, and he was very attached to Dwight. It was around Dwight's birthday. They came over, picture on the wall.
So he took a lot of pictures. He liked
Oh yes, oh yes, those days he took a lot of pictures, and he had a good camera. Mrs. Reynolds, amazing how a small world, because my Aunt Vi was very much friends of the O'Sullivans. That is, Mrs. Reynolds was Faith O'Sullivan. Her mother was very friendly with Aunt Vi, and Aunt Vi was very attached to Mr. Reynolds also. They knew each other. They were very close friends. And Aunt Vi used to go and sleep like a chaperone at Mrs. Wren's home when her mother had to go to the country to do business on business errands. So Mrs. Reynolds was very excited when she found that I was my aunt's niece, because she loved her very much. And they were attached also to your dad, because they went to the same church. Yeah, so it was like a family getting together again. Yeah. I went into prayer and prayed that one thing I'm asking the Lord when we were looking for a house was that we would find a place, a church that was very near to the house that we're expecting from Him, that He would provide for us to raise the children. And sure enough, when we told Brother Wren where we bought this house, he said, I can't believe, on Sunday I spoke at Bedford Park, which is off of Jedburgh Road. So we didn't even know that much about the area, really. We didn't meet Mr. and Mrs. Young because of Civil. We met Mrs. Clark, his mom, but we met the Youngs because we moved here and went to Bedford Park. They were going to Bedford Park for quite a few years. That's where we met them. As a matter of fact, Mrs. Young was Dwight and Ruth's Sunday school teacher when we went there. Yeah, that's how come we got very close, because she was from Jamaica, like us.
And you were good friends with Mrs. Young?
Oh yeah, oh yes, definitely. Until she died. Yeah, we had a good time together, and she was such a good Sunday school teacher that we valued her because she was so good with the children, Dwight and Ruth. Yeah.
And Mr. Young too?
He's special. He's a special man. Oh yes. Oh, I had to listen to his stories. And he would say, I won't continue speaking until Peggy sit and listen. Because I'm always busy like Martha of old. Brother Wren, he was very special to me because he was chosen by everyone that he would act as my father and walk me down where your dad waited for me at the altar on my wedding day. So he's a special person, and he was very funny, He said, well, when he went down the aisle with me, he said, I will give her to you, but if you don't treat her right, I'll take her back. He was a funny man. He was your dad's very close friend. It turned out that they were such friends of my aunt, and yet also they were very close to your dad. Your dad used to have dinner with them a lot on Sundays because he was a single man. Yeah, when he was living in Jamaica. Brother Wren, Mr. Reynolds, was the first guest that we had as a married couple. He came, and we asked permission to the apartment where we had rented. He came and stayed with us for nearly a month when he wanted to find out how Canada was, to make a very big decision to leave Jamaica and come to Canada. He stayed with us for nearly 1 month. He came up alone. Beth and Paul, their 2 children, were younger people in school. So Mrs. Wren, wasn't able to come with him, but he wanted to come and see what Canada is about, to get an idea what they should do. And eventually, over the years, they decided and came. And Mrs. Reynolds and Beth stayed at our home with us at Alberta Avenue when they moved to Canada, before they got an apartment for themselves. First of all, Mr. Reynolds and Paul, they stayed with the Solomons. They couldn't find a family room in our homes that the 4 of them could get accommodations. So they just shared, Mrs. Clark came up because not only Frank got married from our home, but Seville got married to Marie from our home. And so Mrs. Clark and her daughter Patricia came up to the wedding and stayed at Alberta there, because that's where Seville lived. So that's how we met her. Mrs. Clark used to watch me coming from off the bus when my aunt was not able to drive me to church, and she was away in the States for about 7 months. I was left with a housekeeper, and so I would go to church on the bus, walk past her home where she rented, and she used to admire me, she said. And then when Seville, her son, said, I live with Peggy and these folk and Dave, they're so nice, I'm sure you love them. And she came to our home and she said, I know you, because she used to watch me from I was a young girl walking by and admired me in her own way. Ruth?
Or was she more quiet?
Oh, she was quiet, but they were very close. Dwight, that's amazing. I had no problem raising them. They never fought, they never hurt each other.
They played really well.
They played very well, and they were very gentle and with each other. Odd time, Dwight got a few knocks with something, but she wasn't aware as a little child that it would hurt. But Dwight would not try to hurt her back. He was very gentle with her and very, very close. When they grew up older, everyone in the neighborhood knew that they were brother and sister. If Dwight was in Woburn Park, they knew Ruth would be very nearby. They were always together until Ben came into the world. Yes, they were excited. I got a royal treatment. I couldn't do anything they wanted to help me, and because I was going to have a baby, and Dwight thought it's going to be a boy, so he used to come and say, "Hi, Ben," long before we knew that you were a boy. Yes, so he was very proud that he was going to have a baby brother or sister or whatever. But having Ruth, he would prefer a boy, a brother, and he got what he wanted.
And Ruth was sad.
Oh, that's a story. She cried so much. She cried, "Dwight, you have a brother and I don't have a sister," and it went straight on for a pretty long time. And my doctor who delivered you, Ben, said, "Mrs. Phillips, are you going to have any more children?" Dr. Belch. And I said, "I am telling you from now, doctor, it won't take me long. I will see you soon. My daughter is endlessly needing a sister. She cries all the time. And so I am going to pray that the Lord will give her a sister." And sure enough, I went and Esther was born. Then I have exactly what I had as a child. I had 2 little boys, dolls that I made myself. We used to make our toys, little clay dolls. My family was 2 boys and 2 girls when I used to play with dolls. I was a happy woman. I was a happy woman. No, it wasn't. I was young. Then we have all the energy. That's why God caused us to have our children at a certain age, I suppose. Yeah, I was happy. And Dwight and Ruth were not that young. They were able to help themselves because they were big children. 8 and 6. Dwight was 8, I think, when you were born. Everybody had a wonderful time, big preparation, and we had to get everything though. We never really thought of getting like a station wagon or for our family. We had to get stuff, the luggage on the roof of the car and everything. But your dad was a good packer and he reinforced everything very, very carefully. Yeah. And when I go up to the Elim Lodge, I was happy still. Your dad helped me to make the meals and everything, but most of my time was spent in the cottage taking care of my family. Yeah. Just to know they're happy. Dwight used to very liking to play tennis from he was about 11 going, and we paid for him to go down to one less. They had a club for children, and he got lessons from the tennis club to play tennis. And when he goes to Elim Lodge, most of his time at 11, 12, he spent time out on the tennis court playing tennis and badminton with your dad. Yeah, he used to run around with Dwight. Very energetic for his age. He's a wonderful God. He taught me, and I didn't even realize how blessed I am. I think he teaches children in different ways, just like natural father and mother, I suppose. He taught me very much. Step by step, he taught me how much he loved me, and he taught me to trust him in everyday living. He taught me, he would tell me what to say when the need comes to speak, and I was totally dependent on him from I got saved. He taught me how trustworthy he was. He would tell me what to do, and if I am in a fix, as I did one time when I didn't go to the bank to get money over the weekend. For in Jamaica, the banks are closed after noon on a Friday, and our gardener had done extra work, and I didn't know. So I did. I didn't have enough money to pay him because I didn't know he did extra work. I'm saying this because that was the time when my aunt was in the States on holiday, and I was left with the gardener coming to do the chores around the house, the yard, and with an elderly Christian housekeeper. And I had the responsibility of having enough money to pay the bills and the food and to pay the helpers. At a young age, I was still young. And I said to the Lord while I was at work that day, I just said to him quietly at my lunchtime, I really would like to get my gardener who has a family to get all of his pay, and now I realize the bank is going to be closed. And I was at my desk sitting down, and the Lord spoke to me exactly. He told me what I'm to do, just like that. He said, when you go home, tell the housekeeper, tell them not to disturb you for a few minutes. Go into your aunt's room. Her desk, there's a desk. It looks like a table, but that's where she keeps all her mails and everything, and you're to open it up. Go and open it up, and you look carefully. You'll find a letter. You'll find an envelope, and in it you will find money to pay the gardener. Enough money. And when I went home, I put my bag down. I said what he told me to say. Please do not disturb me for a few minutes. I want to be quiet in Aunt Vi's room. It didn't take me long. When I held up the table, my eyes were both focused on the envelope, and I opened it, and I found 20 pounds. That was a lot of money that Aunt Vi had received from someone and just stuck it there. But there it was. He knew it was there, and I just obeyed him, learned to obey him. From those are everyday things he taught me to listen. I'd listen, and I always know his voice. There's no way. It's just like Aunt Vi speaking to me, or any person. You would see me get up and go do something, but I did not talk very much. I just obey, just do what he tells me to do. And I learn to trust him, and that's how he led me into into many, many ways. And he taught me by putting me in position where I had to just trust him. I can remember one experience, and I was a young Christian. I went to work. The morning I was going to work, my aunt was going in town and gave me a drive. She dropped me off down by my work office. Unconsciously, I walk out of the house without my purse that have money to pay my fare to get back home. But the Lord had arranged it. for me to experience his care and to learn to trust him. We got our meals from we had women who made our meals in a lunch place at that office. We even had medical offices that with doctors who took care of us and nurses. That's the type of office I worked in. So I didn't have to have money to buy lunch. I just get up, lunchtime, walk down to the lunchroom and served by these women my lunch. So afternoon came at 4, I think. I left and walked up to the bus stop to get my bus that would drop me straight to my house. And when I opened my purse, my handbag, I realized my purse had left home accidentally. But that was a lesson. That was a lesson. And I stood up at the bus stop. I had no money, not even a cent was in my purse. And the Lord, I said quietly, I didn't even open in my heart. I spoke to him and I said, Lord, you know that how it is. I am totally stranded. I do not have a penny to get home from the city out far up in the suburbs. I'm asking you to send someone. And I even say, Lord, I'm asking you to speak into the heart of that person to offer to pay my way instead of me having to beg the money, to ask for a fare to come home. And I was there for a while, and a lady who worked in my office said to me when she saw me standing there, she had to come up to take a bus very near to my bus stop where we meet to get buses. And she saw me, she says, "What are you doing here so long?" She said to me, "How come you're still here?" I said, "I'm just waiting for my bus." But no buses came and went, really. But I didn't have any money to pay my fare. And then she said to me, "Wait a moment. As I walk, Miss Rose, as I walk towards you, a feeling came over me, a thought came into my mind that my husband is not coming home early tonight. And a thought came to my mind that I am to go on your bus for a long ride up in Popine, and I am to come back down to get my bus. And I have a feeling that I'm to offer, please just answer, please do not feel badly with me. I just feel, could I pay your fare? And I said, thank you very much. Then I said, Lord, you have always come through. Here you are again. He told her to take the same bus and to offer to pay my fare for me. And we chatted and I came off and she went a little bit more and the bus turned back with her down into the city. I can tell you too, there was once, the same time when my aunt was in America and I was responsible to pay the bills. One Christmas, she was away for Christmas and they had given us our Christmas pay, and I had many obligations to the housekeeper and the gardener, and I gave them a little bit more for Christmas. Anyway, I became short for the next payday, and I went to my room And I knelt down the morning before I went to work, and I said, Lord, I have to buy groceries for the house and all of this, and you know that it was Christmas, and I used up my Christmas money, and so I'm asking you, Lord, just to provide for me. I know you know, but you said I'm to ask you. And amazingly, as I said goodbye to the housekeeper, went to work, the secretary for the chief accountant came running to me, smiling, and she said, well, this has never happened before. Mr. Hall has called me in his office, and he said that he felt that some of us, the employees, need a little boost this week, that they need money. Some of them have used their money, and he is offering for us to take from our weekly pay this Friday. That day we can get all the employees to write down how much they would like, because I think they're in need. It's in my heart that there is need by some of them who are short this week, and give them, make up a payroll this week to help them out. And as she said, you know, this is really a special thing, because Mr. Hall has never done this before. And I laughed, and I said, you know something, make me number one. Put me down number one. I needed extra money this week because I was short. Totally amazing. Just ask and we will receive. Knock and the door will be open. Yes, so I learned that no matter what or where, when my parents are not able to help me, they're far away in the country anyway, the Lord was with me. There was such a security with me at all time, no matter where I was. It's amazing how he goes into all these creative way to teach a person who has so wholly and solely given her or his life over. I am totally just depending on him. I just so sensitive and depending on him, like I can't do anything of my own. I have to depend on him, and he would teach me all of this. And the more I learn all these things, the more dependent I learn, and I'm not mistaken that I don't hear his voice. I knew him when he spoke.